Welcome back to another episode of the Shortsighted podcast. Today we have on Kent, who started at minus 3.25 diopters of spherical myopia and minus 3.25 diopters of cylinder. So he had minus 3.25 diopters worth of astigmatism that he now reduced to minus 1.75 diopters of spherical and minus 1 diopter of cylinder. That is really impressive progress and something I wanted to share with you. Kent is also quite active in the forum, in the Le Meow forum. So if you're not in the forum yet, you can find a link to it on the endmyopia.org website, where you can probably chat with him. Lots of updates there also. I hope you enjoy this episode. Here's Kent.
I had great vision when I was a kid. Then kind of because my dad was in the military, we ended up moving to a very small town while my dad was overseas, and I spent a lot of time. I took refuge in the library. So, literally 18 hours a day for the year that he was gone, I was just reading, and I never noticed my vision degrading. And, when he got back, we went back to the military base, and they checked my eyes, and I needed glasses, so I got glasses, and of course they tell you, of course I wanted to stick these things on because I wanted to be able to see again, right? So I wore them all the time. And I ultimately ended up getting to about 3.25. And, I was in the military also. I flew. I was a navigator, which you can fly with, sort of. I had corrected 20/20 vision. So I had good vision, and I don't know how bad it was. I was probably around the 2 mark, the 1.5 or the 2 mark. So it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great vision either. And but I was always looking for, vision therapy or something to, like, I had great vision when I was a kid, like, why can't I get back to this? And so always trying something. And I ran into a doctor about probably 25 years ago, and he set me up with prescriptions that sort of backed me off of my full prescription. So, and I had what we called a near and a distance vision, which is basically norms and diffs. But of course I never really paid a whole lot of attention to what was going on. I mean, I just knew, like, oh, it's a 1/4 diopter here. It's, it's a 1/2 diopter there. I sort of stayed very stable for a really long time. So the reduced prescription really helped. But on the other hand, I didn't get any better, right? I just didn't get worse. Just over a year ago, I had a prescription. I had an appointment, and when I got the glasses, they hurt. Like, literally, when I put my eyeglasses on, just the full strength ones, this right eye, it felt like almost like an ice pick on the eye, right? It was like, and I think it's because I sort of got more and more astigmatism correction. And at sort of the peak, I was at 3.25 sphere and 3.25 astigmatism, which, if you add it up, it's almost 5. It's a spherical equivalent. And I was about 2.75 and 2.75 in this eye, which is, again, just over 4 spherical equivalent. But I wore the glasses. I did what I needed to do. Well, I moved, and I needed to trade out my driver's license, and I went to the driver's bureau, and they have you look in the machine so you can tell what your what your vision is. And the lady goes, okay, read line 12. So I start reading off letters, and look at her, and she goes, what about the other ones? And I'm like, other ones, and so I go in there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I close one eye and open the, and there's, but it's grayed out almost. Like, this eye there's almost no input. So I read those letters with my glasses, And then, and it's like, okay, I got to get checked out, so like now I'm really kind of freaking out because like I said, when I was a kid, I had great vision, right? I had pilot's eyes, and I was a flyer in the military. They were not kidding around with the vision test, right? You don't kind of squint and read the thing. Like they check you 10 ways to Sunday. I went from there to almost blind in this eye. And, I got to fix this, right? So I started looking around. I found a vision therapist here, made an appointment, kind of went in and started working on what I ended up having was amblyopia and strabismus in this right eye. So it had sort of checked out and was, kind of looking down. So I had a difference. So that was last summer, midsummer, late June, early July, that I really started to crank up. It's like, okay, how am I going to do this? Well, I spent almost the entire month of July not wearing glasses whatsoever. And then anyway, into late August and early September, I found Endmyopia, and that's kind of where the story of the improvement really begins, right? So that's kind of where I was about 5 spherical equivalent, about 4 spherical equivalent, and I'm down now to the norms that I'm wearing are actually 1.75, 1, and corrected on both sides, so they're the same. So that's a spherical equivalent of around 2.25. So I've gone basically from 4.75 to 2.25 in just under a year, something like that.
And these are cylinder. Tell me if I
Well,
the cylinder.
sphere, and it's sphere and cylinder. So I have a 1.75 sphere and a 1.00 cylinder in these norms.
That is really great improvement, especially on cylinder. Usually, I always get nervous with cylinder over 2.5 diopters because a lot of times there can be other issues, not necessarily, but fairly frequently, and then it tends to take quite a while to reduce that. So it's super great news that you're back down to just 1 diopter of cylinder.
Yeah.
Do you notice any ghosting or directional blur, anything with that 1 diopter?
I got a little, and I had, before I moved here, I had a corneal scan, and they said I had a mapped astigmatism in this right eye. So, sort of a corneal, it goes, well, there's 5, sort of pathologies, and you've got really sort of the least bad one, it's like, but it still didn't make me feel any better, right? And I still have some residual, and I get a little bit of both, right? I have like almost a double vision in the left eye and then sort of a ghosting in the right eye. But that's part of the stories, I mean, like I have been, a little bit of an Endmyopia heretic, like at one point I'm like, this astigmatism is driving me crazy. And so I ordered fresh glasses, but I kept the spheres and I just dropped the cylinders, right? And I just walked around in blur for 2 or 3 weeks, and then finally it drove me crazy, and I'm like, okay, I can't do this. This is too uncomfortable. And I ordered, and I have a test lens kit, so I checked it out, and I'm like, okay, I think I can drop about a diopter of the cylinder in the replacement glasses. So I did that. And when I went back to the vision therapist, the opto, they basically checked it and they went, yeah, that's about where you're seeing. That was around 1.75 or 1.5. And I've since dropped it, another half diopter. And I see pretty well. And I'm actually getting ready to trade those out for a 1/4 diopter of spheres coming off. And so, but I'm getting to the point where probably 2 weeks, I'll be right at 20/20. I'm somewhere 20/25 probably with those during the day right now.
That's
So
very good.
that's
That's
not
really
bad.
very good. Yeah, and especially, and that's what happens a lot of times. Like if there's a corneal astigmatism, when you start, like your visual cortex corrects for these imperfections a lot of times, and your vision's fine. Like that thing's probably always been there, very possibly. No medical advice, but very likely. But once you, if that's there, when you correct for it, your brain is fine with it, right? And that's where a lot of times those astigmatism numbers get really high relatively, when there is something present that's not just because the optometrist gave you cylinder correction. The cool thing though is, like in your case, like when you start reducing that, your visual cortex, your brain goes, okay, I can correct for this if you do it in small enough decrements to where there's only a little bit of directional blur.
Yeah.
Of course, you know all this, where you give it enough time and you do enough correcting with spherical that you don't get too much of that, that you can get rid of most, if not all of it, with a little bit of time.
I'm hoping that as the sphere gets closer and closer to emmetropic, it'll become less and less of an issue. And I think it is. You know, I mean, there are like security lights out here, and I tend to start and end my day on my balcony looking, you know, sort of around at different things. That's just kind of a good way to start and end the day. And I'm noticing, you know, just, you know, when you have the astigmatism, you get the flare, and I'm seeing less and less of that now, even uncorrected, right? You know, so like I have to keep reminding myself, you know, about what I was seeing 6 months ago. And I discovered too big a drop it doesn't work well for me. But, you know, sort of if I'm dropping it a little bit at a time, you know, it will work itself out. You know, so I think it's both physical and the visual cortex. So I was doing a quarter diopter of sphere and cylinder. I did a round or two like that at the same time, and that was just, it wasn't too much from a visual comfort perspective. It felt like the astigmatism was holding me up from getting the good clarity. So I did a round of, okay, I'm just dropping the cylinder, you know, and I did half a diopter of cylinder, and that worked really well. You know, it's like it took a few weeks. I felt a little crazy for the first 3 weeks. And then there was a week where it was like, oh, this is actually working out. And then it's like, now I'm at that point where I'm seeing really well with these glasses, right? I'm looking at trees that are 25 and, you know, 40 meters away, and I can see the leaves, right, without the blur, this is good. This is good. Um,
Yeah.
and so,
It
yeah.
sounds like you've also had some interesting encounters, because you mentioned the optometrist 25 years ago already gave you reduced corrections for close-up, so that must have been somebody who's kind of has the right idea. And then your current one, who seems to
Yeah.
be easygoing about the reductions, right?
Yeah, they always kind of go, "Ooh," you know, but I mean, you can't mess with success, right? I mean, so I did 16 sessions back in September, October, November, and we were really working on this vertical, and they have some very cool tools, right? Like, you know, the VR headsets, and you're in there, and what they do is they turn the visual input for the good eye down, and then and not only do they, you know, so this eye has to work really hard to, you know, sort of catch up, but they skew the vision so that this eye has to, you know, so the eyes end up having to go against the grain of the natural thing, so that you can play the game, right? And it gets harder and harder as you go along. And so by the end of it, you're kind of going, it's really hard. So I had an intake and an outtake, and I had probably half to 3/4 of a diopter in the 2.5 months of time that it took me to get through those 16 sessions, right? and they're like, what's going on here? And I'm like, well, okay, I found this program and this is what I'm doing, and they're like, okay, that's outrageous. Like, we're really interested in kind of tracking this, right? So then I came back after the new year when, new insurance, and did another intake. And again, another half diopter, right? Is off of, like, these people tested me, in August. They tested me again in October. They test me again in January. It's diopter gone, right? And the, 3/4 of a diopter of astigmatism is off of the prescription, and they're looking and, going, okay, so, all right, we want to work, we want to work with you. So I'm doing a couple of other things in that same venue, but it's, so they're interested, they're intrigued, but my doctor, she kind of goes, I can't believe that, people will, can just write a prescription and send it off and they'll send you the glasses. So, well, but in my case, it works,
Yeah. And she better get used to it, because it's going to be more of that happening here as everything goes online. And also, I'm thinking they should be more open-minded anyway, because they're doing vision therapy. So they're familiar with the eyes adopting to stimulus, right?
Yeah. People, but they work a lot with children and, people who have, like, the strabismus and, sort of that kind of thing, or they have convergence problems, like they don't see, like they can't hit the ball, when it's coming, because their eyes are, kind of askew. And so they do a lot of that kind of work. And acuity is not really something that they work on. And that was how I met my doctor. Is he was a vision therapist, the 25 years ago, when he had a machine, and you looked in this machine, you wore a set of headsets, it was biofeedback. And the idea was, it was basically a retinoscope attached to this, to an input that made an oral sound. So if you can get the sound to rise in pitch, it meant you were relaxing your eyes. You were basically like active focus. Well, this is a $20,000 machine, and I was paying $80 for half an hour. That was a lot of money back then, right? This is, in the mid 1990s. That's how I met that guy. So, but, and I would say, I want better vision, right? And he goes, I don't know any way to fix the acuity. Nobody knows how to, like, so here we have all these people without degrees. I mean, thousands of us, and we're getting improved vision, right? I don't know what to say.
It's the same, like, because now that I'm in this weird space, before I wasn't that exposed, but I keep hearing other stories of people where there's all these complicated medical solutions and quote unquote prescriptions for things that people find really easy fixes for, that don't cost a lot of money and that aren't that complicated. And while I try to avoid the conspiracies and I try to avoid the all modern medicine is bad talk, but there's definitely a gray area where there are probably better answers to things than symptom treatment. I don't know. I mean, it just seems that there's a fair bit of focus on what's the quickest, easiest thing that we can do that also makes everybody good money, that addresses a symptom.
Right. Well, and we go down these paths, it's, there's a thing in neuroscience, right? It's the neurons that wire together, that fire together, right? It's like, they started with this, in the 1600s, when people started reading books. It's like, it's the printing press and the books and the eyeglasses, right? And the rise of optics. It all came about the same time. So, it's like, and I'm not convinced that eyeglasses weren't fashion at the beginning. right? And then once they put them on, then they needed them. It's like, okay, you're an academic, you wear glasses, and sort of. But and that's become like I've talked to people about this, and it's like, hey, I mean, yoga instructors with big thick glasses, and I go, do you like wearing your glasses? No, not really. And it's like, well, there's a mechanism. I'm doing it, right? I'm in the middle of it. And they kind of go, wow, that's really fascinating. And it's like next week, it's like, well, I'm just getting a new pair of contacts, right? It's like
and I think that's the flip side of it. Like, we're certainly in a space, supply and demand is working this out. Of course, I make fun of the lens sellers and I say terrible things about the lens sellers, but the reality is the demand is there. And there's a small group or small minority of people who really don't want to wear these things and they'll put in the effort to get rid of them. But then there's plenty of people like there's a quicker, easier fix, and then they'll just do that. So
yeah,
we shouldn't be
that's
mad about it.
no, and I'm not mad. And like, I mean, that's in my family. My wife is, she had LASIK surgery probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And so, and like they had it on television, right? Like you're standing, I can see her in through the glass and at television, and with on her eye, and I could see the thing and, it's like, and then the laser and the smoke is coming off it. And I'm like, I'm out of here. I cannot watch this, right? And I'm just, and like I had been considering it. It's like, there's no way you're not doing that to my eyes. And so now we have this dichotomy, and it's like, okay, she spent $5,000 on that, right? And that was cheap at the time, right? It was $2,500 an eye 10 years ago. Now it's down to like $750 an eye, right? It's that I heard an ad last summer, and they were doing it for $250 an eye, right? You that's just crazy. That's $500. Like you can't buy contacts for a year for that, So when this came up, I'm like, I want the Back to 2020 program, and so and she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, I don't think this is snake oil, right? I don't think this is unicorn farming. I think it's, I think this is going to work. And I kind of want the deal, I want it. And so she goes, okay, because we always talk about it, it's like, I just did PayPal, right? It's like, this is how it's going to go. And that was all helpful, to have it sort of just laid out. And, it kind of gave me even, with my complex prescription, I needed as much help as I could get. I mean, I still made a lot of mistakes. I've got a bag full of glasses that I can bring out here and show you. It's nuts. I mean, like, does anybody recognize this?
And I think what I really like is that despite all my ranting and sarcasm and obscure jokes, that you're seeing through that and you're going, okay, here, this makes sense, and the science makes sense, and it makes me happy that I don't have to be a assumed authority figure, right? Because I don't have any titles. I'm not going to go to school for it. I'm not doing any of the things that make you go, I'm just going to trust this guy. But that you're just doing it on your own, like that you're figuring out that the approach makes sense, and then you do it for yourself is exciting to me.
Well, and I've got a science background. I have a degree in computer science. I have an advanced degree in data analytics. I've always been, I'm a scientist. I'm an engineer. So I understand physics. And I understand, it's like, it's sort of the idea that there's a biological mechanism, right? It's like, I mean, you can work out and make your arms bigger, it's like your arms aren't going to get any bigger by sitting around thinking about it, you got to go lift weights, it's like, and I look at it and I go, yeah, exactly. I spent a year, I probably read 1,000 books in a year, when I was 9 years old. No wonder my eyes went bad, right? I mean, like, and sticking my head down on the desk with a book in my lap, the book is 5 inches away from my face, it wasn't a cell phone. So it was 1974, but that's what happened. So,
How does
and
this
I could
affect
see it.
how does this affect your day-to-day and life in general, the lower correction that you have now versus before? I ask this question because I'm always curious a little bit about the emotional context and the psychological bit of what's it like to have been so recently at this higher diopter and high cylinder correction that you needed to now where you don't need most of that stuff.
It's amazing, and actually, some of the biggest sort of long-term things are just the comfort, right? I mentioned, sort of that feeling, that ice pick feeling in my eyes from it's when your eyes are so overstrained, and they were like that all the time. Um, just sort of the relief of having a little bit more normal vision, and I'm looking around. Like, there was a point last summer, sort of when I was at the bottom of it before I started the vision therapy, sort of when everything was at its worst, and I was, like, everything was so blurry, and I'm like, how can this be possible? How can this be so bad, right? I mean, it was dismaying, and I mean, I know there are people who have higher, you know, prescriptions. They've got worse refractive states than I had. And I, I don't know that I could have, you know, emotionally, that would have been a very tough place for me to be in. So this is good. And I go through like little dips, and troughs, like, this isn't working. This isn't working. And then, and then a week and a half later, it's like, oh, yeah, this is almost perfectly clear. Like, if I stayed in these things for an extra 3 weeks, I'd be 20/20 in them, which is amazing, because where I'm at right now is sort of where that was the mistake that my doctor made. Was he would reduce the sphere, but he kept the cylinder the same. So I had, these really pathological, like the last pair I had was like, I want to say it was 1.75 and a 3.25 in the right. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And people, like, and I tell them this, and they put my glasses on and just go, "Ooh, that hurts." Yeah, it hurts. I can't go back to wearing those glasses. I
Yeah.
just can't.
And there's some people in the forum, like Denise, right? Like started at minus 18 diopters.
17 or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
just, and with astigmatism. I mean, yeah. So three or four diopters of astigmatism, and it's like, well, I guess compared to 18, that's really not too bad, but I just can't imagine it. It's like I said, there was an ice pick in this eye, and from every once in a while, like right now, I'm going through. I have to do a computer security certification, and it's 1,200 pages of material that I have to study. And, so I'm spending a lot of time, at near, and at the end of a couple hours, I start to feel it. I can really start to feel it. I have to take a break and get out there and just, I mean, 10 or 15 minutes worth of, I'm not looking at a book or a computer screen for the next, until I feel relaxed again. But yeah, it's been a massive improvement, and I know I'm slowing down a little bit, and I probably have about a year and a half or so back to 20/20, if I can get there, like the astigmatism, but who really knows, just,
I it, I think it'll resolve fine. Considering how much it has improved is a really good indicator that it may take a while. You know what I mean? Like that last half diopter may stick for a while, but it'll still, it's a guess, right? Like it's anyone's guess, but I would be pretty comfortable saying that most likely you'll be able to get rid of all of it.
I think so, because I really don't think it was there. when I was a kid, and I really didn't have much, probably maybe a half diopter or less when I was when I was flying for the military. And I was in it for about 3 years of, from 87 to 90, taking, doing the flight physicals, right? And every 6 months, you're in there getting another exam. And, it just wasn't that bad. It wasn't a factor. So and I was an adult at that stage, right? I mean, I was 22, 23, 24 years old. So, I think it probably will resolve. There may be some, minor little fluctuations or whatever, but I mean, I'll take it. The, if I can pass the driver's license test, and without needing glasses, I'll be happy. That's kind of one of the goals.
The other thing I want to point out here is age, because I get this question every so often, or people going, oh, I'm already too old for this. And of course, neither one of us are old, but you're certainly at a point where you're not a teenager anymore, and this is still working just fine as far as the process. The stimulus works fine, and your eyes responding to this works fine. I just want to point that out, especially to those who are just listening. Clearly, we're not really dealing with an age-related limitation here.
All right. Well, and my vision therapist, I think well, I know I have a child who's older than my vision therapist, right? And the middle child is the question of who's older. But at any rate, she's kind of going, oh yeah, no, it's presbyopia, and so she's kind of got me doing this. She's kind of got me doing this thing where patch one eye, and then you use a near lens and a plus and a minus lens and a plus lens, and you sort of practice that because she's worried that I'm getting presbyopia, right? I don't think I'm getting presbyopia because I can see it, I mean, I can put this stuff 3 or 4 inches from my face and read it. I'm not having to hold it out to here.
No, and one of my issues, and the part of the reason there's so many rants on the website is because a lot of the things I write in response to some of the things I see. And presbyopia is clearly one of those things where in the textbook it says, if the person's in the 40, they're having the onset of presbyopia, and you want to give them plus lenses. And that's just what it says. So it's not their fault, but it's also, in my anecdotal experience, entirely unrealistic, because most people that I know, and pretty much all people that have significantly improved the eyesight and are now in that so-called presbyopia age range, have 0 symptoms. Yes, the lens hardens, that's a fact, right? Like the lens hardens,
Right.
Close focus can be more challenging. You may not see the tip of a needle at 3 inches from your eye, but as far as presbyopia, that's a symptom that manifests in a way that you need lens correction for it, I think is quite overblown.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's like I big aviation buff. I read Chuck Yeager's autobiography probably, I don't know, 25 years ago maybe, and he was talking about that, and he's like, my wife needs glasses for this and glasses for that and glasses for the other thing, and he's like, I can still thread the needle without needing glasses, right? I mean, and Chuck Yeager's like 92 years old or something, it's like he's still flying those planes, with no glasses. He's, but it's because he uses his eyes right. He's out there, he's looking close, he's looking far, he's, sort of doing the right things. It's like, and that I think, to me, and I hear a lot of people, going, oh, this isn't working, like which lenses do I need to get, and do I need to go up or I need to go down? Or, like, work on your habits, like for me, that was the big thing was, getting up and getting off the computer and walking out and actually looking. it was hard for me to train myself to look further than 15 or 20 or 30 feet, right? Like to really look into the distance. And, looking at a cloud, like that's a good ways away. Looking at the moon, that's a good ways away, like, and that sort of, it took a while to get into that habit and to sort of feel like, I don't really want to be looking at this thing. Like, what kind of work can I be doing? How can I incorporate activities in my workday and my day that require me to get away from this thing, these books, this whatever, and go do something else, right? And
And
I think a lot of people miss it.
yeah, and that's true. And I see a lot of times I get a disproportionate amount of really nice improvement reports from parents with kids who don't want to be wearing the glasses, who are forced to wear glasses, who are still in a low diopter range. When they figure out I can take those glasses off and see, a lot of times kids are improving very quickly. And we could say, it's youth, it's plasticity of the eye, but a lot of times a correlated thing I see is that kids are playing, and they're
Yep.
playing with intent. It's not like us where we're like, what, I got to spend an hour away from my phone. That's going to be so hard. Whereas you're giving a kid a soccer ball and a group of friends, they're going to be playing for 4 hours, and all the active focus and all the distance vision and all the things that we talk about in this like dry sort of clinical boring context, they do, right? Like Chuck Yeager, 90 something, flying airplanes. It's not a question of how much do I need to do active focus. It's I'm looking around because I'm flying a plane, right? Like
Yeah.
the reality of those activities makes a huge difference in improvement.
Yeah, I think it does. And that's kind of I mean, there was a little bit of a learning curve, So, but I kind of was also very motivated because I had this, I mean, that amblyopia, that strabismus, I mean, it was exhausting carrying that around, right? Like I was at work, so like now I'm trying to get both eyes going at work. And, so sort of, okay, I'm covering, like checking it. Is it working? Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? And 2 hours, 3 hours of that, man, I'm exhausted, right? I mean, I'm nodding off. I need a nap. Like I work for somebody. I can't nod off, just go take a nap. So, that I think, and we could probably edit a lot of this rant out, but it's kind of like that was a hard thing, was trying to figure out how do I incorporate these breaks, and it's like, and so I can change that pattern. And once I did that, once I went through that process, the exhaustion went away, my eyes started working better together, and just, and I could feel the improvements, and it didn't take long, I mean, it took a couple months. It probably took me about 8 weeks to kind of get, everything back, and close, with a little bit of degradation, which I've kind of mostly overcome now. I'd say probably 95%. Most of what is left is just residual from the astigmatism, the mapped, astigmatism.
I love it. It makes me super happy, especially these kinds of stories where we're dealing with a little bit more of a complicated scenario. And the high cylinder, I think there are people that are dealing with more significant degrees of astigmatism. And I'm happy when someone gets to hear like your story of improvement, being able to get that back under control. And also, while I really appreciate having you on, I have to mention for those that are listening or watching that they can also find you in our forum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I'm there pretty much every day, mostly mornings, evenings, sometimes a little bit more than others. But yeah, I like it. And I find the encouragement of the community is really good. I took a lot when I first came into the forum from other people who had kind of been down this road. There's, the FMRs and the astigmatism assassin, sort of stories that, like, okay, this is encouraging us. How did you deal with this? And, Hanny is big. And then, of course, Matt Ely and, not Andrew, like those stories, and sort of seeing those videos and and connecting with those people, and it's like, okay, these are real people who are doing this. It's like, and my wife, it's like, she's kind of interested, but she's not that interested, right? I mean, and I'm kind of trying to feed her the Endmyopia line now. It's like, well, you had the surgery, like, no touch-ups, like, let's do the touch-ups through Endmyopia, like through good habits. And because she's still really close to 20/20, which after 10 years is pretty good. She does a lot of meetings and stuff. It's like, okay, but the breaks, every 40 minutes, take a break, get up, walk around, go look, change that focal distance. And, and she's like, oh, so it's coming up, but she doesn't want to talk to me about this stuff. Like and I'm changing my glasses next week. And it's like, oh, that's really cool. Congratulations. But the people on the forum, that's where you get a lot of, that community. It's great.
Yeah. And I like the combination, like we're having a chat, but then you're also in the forum and being able to connect all that together, right? Like somebody can listen to you, can watch this video, but can also find you in the forum. I can find you in the forum. We're all having these conversations that I think ideally for those that are watching or listening, there's a lot of community support. Like while all the resources are there, the people are also there and the stories are there to get you into a space where you feel like you can accomplish this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and some of the best threads have been things like, like, what were your biggest mistakes? Right. It's like that's a good one that just kind of popped back up. And it's like, I looked at it and I'm like, this thing has been sitting here for 2 years. How did I miss it? And then it's like, I wrote a huge post, but at the end of it, I kind of like, well, so what did I learn from all those mistakes, right? And then if somebody is new, is watching this podcast and goes to Limiao forum, and finds it, that's a summary. They've got a similarly complex prescription. If I'm in my mid 50s. By all rights, I should be, Zenny thinks I need plus 2.25 as a near vision ad on anything that I buy, but I just buy single lenses and it drives them crazy. I'm sure, it's their AI bots are over there talking in the background going, why won't this guy buy, multifocal lenses? It's like those things are much more profitable.
Yeah, well, what can you do? All right, I think we covered it. I'm trying not to get these too long, even though I'm interested in all the details. I would say, yeah, I appreciate you being on. Unless you have other things you want to add to it, I think we're good on this.
I think we've covered a lot of ground. I mean, it's I'm amazed. I'm really happy. I want to thank you for putting all that material out, for putting it all together. I mean, I watched your hour and 15-minute long live stream. That was, of course, you should keep it up. I don't know where it is, but you should keep it out there. And and of course the blog, with all of the resources and stuff. I mean, I kind of did a lot of means checking and, sort of like, and it's not exactly 100% right on, but it's like, once you get the idea, of how to do it, it's like, in that story of, being a world traveler, and meeting different optometrists and sort of talking to them and grabbing these nuggets and sort of pulling those threads, right? Like I started, when I got my glasses first thing I did was go to the library and pull out the encyclopedia and start reading about myopia, and eyeballs and eyesight and, and then it says a diopter is inverse meter. What's a meter? Then I'm into the metric system and I'm kind of like figuring all of this stuff out. So I knew all that back in the 70s, but sort of the idea of it being a few millimeters, of change in the eyeball. That's all that's needed in the stimulus response. For 40 years, I just lived with it, and then, in a year, look at the amount of improvement. Like, I'm basically livable without glasses. It's not super comfortable. I don't recognize my friends, but I could survive, right? If I got in my car today and left my glasses, I could drive from here to, wherever. I might not be able to see road signs, but, I'm not going to hit anybody.
Don't do it, okay? Just for anybody listening, don't drive without your glasses, though.
Yeah, don't drive without your glasses, that's for sure. But I could do it, right? Like, I mean, if there's an SHTF, sort of moment, I could, when the stuff hits the fan, I could survive it, and I think in a year, I'd be livable, like I could do whatever I needed to do. And that stuff is amazing. So, appreciate you and putting all that together, and the Back to 2020 course and all that text and all of the things that you went through to get to that stage. That's actually a remarkable, it's a remarkable achievement, it really is.
I appreciate it, and my reward is that we're having this chat and I'm able to share it. Like, I need the karma points.
I know that feeling. Yeah, I know that feeling. I'm kind of that way. So it's one of the reasons I like to help out on the forum, so, people come, they look, and I think there's a lot of people that have that same sort of very gracious and gratitude, attitude. That's why they're there, and it makes it a good place to spend. If you're going to be spending time online, that's as good a place as any, right?
I mean, we're biased, but I would say so, definitely. All right, Kent, I really appreciate it. I'll repeat again for everybody listening or watching, you can find Kent in the forum, most likely, along with lots of other people that are making these similar, or having similar kind of experiences. And again, thank you so much, Kent, for being on.
Oh, thank you. Yep, and the Facebook group too. It's although it's so huge, it's overwhelming when I go in there, and I just don't have time.
And that was Kent. Again, as I usually say in these episodes, I hope this adds to your motivation. I hope this adds to your understanding, and I hope this adds to your readiness to do something about your myopia, and especially in this case also if you have a lot of cylinder correction. Kent is anecdotal proof that you can work on that as well. There's a fair amount that you can do with gradual reduction, less strain, and a little bit of targeted stimulus. It's not rocket science, it's pretty straightforward. It works exactly the reverse as your increasing myopia did, so there's not any real magic here. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the podcast, either YouTube channel or in your favorite podcast app, and we'll talk to you in the next one.